Hey everybody, welcome back to the Plays and Fades YouTube channel. I'm your host, Gordo Games. Welcome back to another full card breakdown. This time for UFC 291, we have ourselves one of the most highly anticipated pay-per-views of the year for a very good reason. And we're here to talk some fights, guys. We have 12 fights on tap for Salt Lake City this weekend, one that is filled with a lot of veterans of the sport and fun fights we want to see, and a lot of puzzling matchups, both from a DraftKings and a betting perspective. I mean, there is a lot to cover, a lot I want to talk about, and I want to make sure I don't make this video too long, so I say we get into it. But quickly before we do so, hit the like button down below, subscribe to the channel, check out DailyFanMMA for all my work on there, and check me out on Twitter at GamblesGord. I'll be posting my full card of bets there, as well as my betting leans, DraftKings plays, Rainmakers at the end of this video here. Feel free to stick around, should be timestamped down below. Let's do this. We get the night started with the 11-5 Miranda Maverick taking on the 12-4 Priscilla Cachoeira, and what is just a wild clash of styles here. It's pretty simple. You have someone, Priscilla Cachoeira, who is a zombie girl. I mean, that's what she's nicknamed. She's a zombie girl, and it's perfectly apt for her because she is someone with no defense whatsoever and someone who can continually walk forward with her striking. The biggest red flag, though, is not only can she be hit a ton, but she can be taken down, controlled, and submitted by almost anybody. Okay, that's harsh. Maybe not anybody, but we've seen her taken down and controlled a few times before. But when you're facing someone like Miranda Maverick, who's going to want to go out there and primarily grapple, which she tends to do all the time, it seems to be a pretty binary matchup, which is why we have one of the largest favorites on the card. Now, here's the hesitancy: is we just saw Miranda Maverick fight, and she was out there and she was dominated. I bet on Maverick, one of the worst bets I've had of the year. Didn't matter because she didn't fight the best of her ability. She got out wrestled, out physicaled, out fought. Every single aspect by Jasmine Jasudavicius on the Canadian card. Not to be Canada, way to steal my money there, but despite that, that was against someone who was a silver medalist in wrestling, who has a wrestling background, whereas Cachoeira doesn't have any of that. Cachoeira wants to stand and bang, and against someone, Miranda Maverick, who is as dominant, who is as physically imposing as Miranda Maverick is, you have to expect her to go out there, take her down, and look to impose her will. Prior to that matchup, Maverick went out there, landed 5 takedowns against Shanna Young, and then 4 against Sabina Mazo, both of which leading her to victory, and I think that path to victory is definitely there. Now, is it a certainty? No, because if Cachoeira is able to stop the takedown, she will be winning the striking exchanges. We saw Maverick didn't like it when she was pressured, and she didn't like it when there was a ton of volume coming her way, the two things that Cachoeira does best. So don't get me wrong. This is Maverick's role. She should win this fight at a very, very high clip. I'm just hesitant. I made my mistake back in Maverick before. There still are wrinkles in her game she's going to have to sort out, but she has a very, very clear path to victory in what should be a dominant performance if she's able to follow it. So again, if I said Cachoeira is going to struggle to win minutes and Maverick's going to have such a upside on the grappling division, the under is very, very live here. I think it's sitting around even money. I'll probably end up playing that. And I also think Maverick inside the distance, one of those early plays, if I get a decent enough number on that, she should have such an advantage on the ground that those numbers might be worth it. Haven't locked anything yet, but that's something to look out for. DraftKings wise, I mean, this is a fight you're going to want to have some interest in because Maverick is a wrestler here. She's going to have upside in her wins. She scored 118, 110, 98, 109. Very good stylistic matchup. And at someone at 9.4, we'll talk about a lot of options on this card. And I do think she is someone who is very, very viable for you. Flip side of things, Cachoeira is that GPP pivot. She doesn't win often, but when she's done, she's put out 128 points before. She's put out 108 points before. Her ceiling is definitely there, and if she's going to win this fight, it's going to require a ton of volume and potentially even a finish over someone in Maverick who is such a primary wrestler. So both these sides are viable. I lean towards Maverick. I think Maverick is also a very viable play in cash as well, but there are so many more fights to talk about. Let's go on to the next one. Next up, we have a short notice replacement, Euros Medic 8-1 versus the 11-5 Matthew Semelsberger. And Semelsberger is actually a guy I've done a show with in the past on someone else's channel. But what I realized is that this guy's a super cool dude, semi the jetty, has a good mind for the sport, and he's getting what seems to be a very, very fun matchup. One of the most underrated matchups on the card, potential for fight of the night here because of both these guys' styles. Euros Medic, like I said, coming in on short notice, going up a weight class to face someone like Semelsberger. And Medic is someone who has done pretty well. 2 wins in the UFC, and they both come in the first 2 rounds. I mean, he scored 121 against Cruz, 108 against Morales. The guy is a very powerful striker, a very, very quick in and out movement as well, and it seems to have a pretty well-rounded game. But don't get me wrong, there are some concerns on the Medic side. I mean, the Alaska FC resume, all the fights ending in the first couple rounds. He's never made it out of the 3-minute mark in round 2. But what we have here is someone who is very, very offensive minded with a great offensive skill set. However, we haven't seen him really tested too much, and this seems like not the best matchup for him in terms of all the external circumstances happening his way. And I guess someone who's coming up a weight class, who we haven't really seen his cardio tested, facing a power puncher at elevation. This is going to be a big talking part of the card, is we're going to have a lot of elevation talks here. It really zaps the gas tank. I was at Salt Lake City last time for 278, and I saw that happen live. And when I think you're on a shorter camp, facing a guy who's much larger than you, and Matthew Semelsberger here, Medic is going to potentially have his struggles here. Skill for skill at size parity and at camp parity, if they would have time to train for it, Medic might be the side because I like his volume, I like his power, and we've seen Semelsberger rock before. But Semelsberger not only is he the more physically imposing guy, this guy has power. He's landed 9 knockdowns in his 8 UFC fights, including 6 in his last 3 fights alone. He has a ton of power, and you can definitely go out there and put that to use against a guy who hasn't really been tested too much in the power department in medics. Additionally to this, he has some wrestling upside. I mean, he landed 3 takedowns against Matthews, 1 against Moreno, 1 against Fletcher, accrued some top time there, and he has the ability to go out there and implement that ground game. Because we saw Jalen Turner take down and submit Medic on the ground, and I think Semelsberger has that path and wants to go to it as well. All this to say is Semelsberger has more paths to victory, and I agree that he should be favored in this spot. Although we can say all these things about size parity and camp parity, like I mentioned before, it's not true. And in this moment in time right now, we have someone in Semelsberger who has more things we can bank on, and has a style who I think should lead him to be favored. Now, I haven't got there myself because I do think that the overall skill set of Medic is reliable, and I think that he has some decent offensive power, which makes me not want to lay too much chalk on Semelsberger. But this fight on DraftKings is what I want, because 8.6K Semelsberger's gone out there and he scored 102, 126, 126, 103 before in his wins in the UFC, and he is someone who has that knockout wrestling path to victory that you want to see from a favorite. Flip side of things, like I said, Medic's all his wins and fights have ended in the first 2 rounds, scoring 108, 121. His path to victory is probably finding the chin of Semelsberger and scoring very well in the process. Very volatile matchup. I love to see this one. I wonder if the cardio Medic will drain at elevation, but I do think there are more things to trust on the Semelsberger side. For that reason, he will be the pick. Both of them are great DraftKings targets, though. Next up, 11-4-1 CJ Vergara, 14-5 Vinicius Salvador. Tough one, because these are both guys I want to fade. These are both guys who I've faded before. Faded Salvador huge last time with Alta Marino. I was pretty high on him there. And Vergara is someone who I view as a well-rounded fighter, but he doesn't excel in any area. He doesn't have incredible striking. He can be outstruck, he can be out-grappled, he can be taken down. He's just a guy with incredible cardio and a well-rounded skill set. Salvador has been a bit up and down, though. He's not someone who's been too reliable. He looked really well against Ross in the Contender Series, and then he did exactly what I thought against Alta Marino, and he didn't look that great. Albeit he looked a lot worse than I expected, showboating. Don't really know what he was doing in that fight there, pretending like he won it. But I think that skill for skill, the more talented fighter here is Vinicius Salvador, but stylistically it may be the Vergara side. I mean, at elevation, I know I can really trust Vergara's skill set. I know he has more minute winning ability in terms to go out there and potentially use some grappling, potentially use some more volume in his case. Because although I said Vergara doesn't really have too good of technical striking, I think Salvador is the better technical striker. Vergara does have more volume, better optics, and better output to win him a decision in that case. And at elevation, I think he could go out there and be the more likely winner of the two. That being said, Salvador is the more competent striker in my opinion, so if he landed a knockout shot, would I be surprised? No. So to me, it seems like a pretty simple one to call, is that the pick's going to be Vergara, but I don't know how much I want of him on DraftKings. He scored 83 in his 1 decision win so far against Rodriguez. I don't see him finishing Salvador too often here. So to me at 8.7, I'd much rather have someone like Semelsberger or Rogerio de Lima or Holland, those 3 people below him. And I'd much rather go towards this Salvador side, who I think his major win condition here is finding the chin of Vergara, because I don't see him winning the optics too much. The pick is Vergara, more DraftKings ownership on Salvador. A very interesting matchup, but one I'm going to pick Vergara to get his hand raised at the end of the day. Speaking of friends of the show, 12-5-1, Darius Flowers takes on the 18-6 Jake Matthews. Darius Flowers was on the Plays and Fades YouTube channel. Shout out. He broke down his own Dana White Contender Series fight there, and he went out there and he pulled off a win. He did exactly what he wanted to. That was a fun video to do, to talk to him, and now he's here in the UFC facing someone in Jake Matthews, who's had a bit of an underwhelming run recently. Well, it wasn't really a run. His last performance wasn't as good as we expected. He came in as a huge favorite against Semelsberger, and he let people down. And truth be told, I like Jake Matthews' skill set, and I like his well-rounded game plan, his ability to mix it up everywhere this fight goes. And I think that he's going to have the most important attribute here, which is that cardio. This fight is a short notice bout replacement, and Darius Flowers has no cardio. That is at regular fight elevation. This is in Salt Lake City, in Utah, and you have a guy in Darius Flowers who has been finishing all 5 of his losses most of the time due to him gassing, and I don't think that's the best necessary combination of the two. So yes, Darius Flowers is a super explosive guy. He has the ability to finish the fight at all time, very physically imposing, and the ability to mix it up in the ground game, but also throw with fighting intention. And we did see Matthew Semelsberger knock down and take down Matthews 3 times apiece. So we know that the path to victory is there for Darius. But truth be told, the more well-rounded fighter, the more experienced fighter, the better technical fighter, and overall the guy with better cardio here is Jake Matthews, and I completely agree with him being favored here. The win condition of Darius Flowers makes me want to play him at 6.9K in these GPP plays as a contrarian play, because he's going to need that finish to win, because he won't be really surviving after round 1. But after that first round, I think Jake Matthews can use his takedown upside. I think he can use his volume. And I think he probably melts Darius Flowers to a second or third round to finish win, which could score very well. When we see him do that against Fiallo, he did only score 98, which isn't necessarily what you want to see because Jake Matthews isn't the best overall DraftKings scorer. But I think on a card like this, he's definitely someone you want to look towards. He has finished upside. This fight is expected to finish at a distance, and I think he has such a cardio edge here. He's a very viable play at 9.3. But considering the win condition for Flowers, I think he's also viable on DraftKings. Both these guys are people who look at their target. However, I do think Jake Matthews wins this fight a lot of the time, aside from that round 1 knockout from Flowers that we know he has. I just don't think happens too often. Next up, 10-2 Roman Kopylov, 11-3 Claudio Ribeiro. Ribeiro's not someone I rated too highly. Let's just put it that way. He came off the Contender Series, and I knew I wanted to fade him. I did it successfully with Razak Al-Hassan, and his style just isn't one that I see winning too long-term in the UFC. But here's when it comes to the hindsight is 2020 kind of thing. You know, I bet big on Punahele Soriano against Roman Kopylov in that matchup, and Kopylov destroyed him. One of my worst bets of the year was on Punahele Soriano, and there's no explaining that. I thought Punahele Soriano would have takedown success. I think he would have more power in this matchup. And Kopylov proved me wrong here. And Kopylov even finished a super tough Punahele Soriano there, showing those constant improvements. So to me, we have a pretty simple matchup. We have a guy in Claudio Ribeiro who just throws these wild exchanges from the outside. A ton of power, but he can be hit. He is not very defensively sound, and he can be taken down. He's an offense-first type of fighter, which, you know, can be fun to watch at times, but Roman Kopylov has been so poised. He's made a ton of improvements all over the place, and although he can be taken down on his own right, he seems to be working on that wrestling. He seems to have the proper mindset to want to keep this on the feet, and I think on the feet, he is far sharper, great punches down the pipe there, and something that I do think could rock Claudio Ribeiro and get a finish here. I think the most likely outcome of this fight is a finish either side, and we have ourselves yet another fight you really want to target, because Kopylov last time went out and scored 108 against Soriano. When he's going out there, when he's on his game, he has a ton of volume, very good power, and he has finishability against a guy in Ribeiro who can be cracked, who can be hit a lot. Flip side of things, Ribeiro's path to victory is probably either massively improving that ground game and trying to expose Kopylov, or landing a big power punch that I thought Punahele might have a chance to. When Ribeiro's winning, he scored 110 last time, and for that reason, he is someone who is going to be pretty viable here. However, I don't think he has that same technicality that Punahele did, and for that reason, I think he's going to struggle to get inside the range, and especially without being hit here, I think he's going to be at a huge speed and technicality disadvantage. The power's there for Ribeiro, the offensive skill set is decent, the defensive skill set is not. For that reason, give me Kopylov. He should win this fight here. He is a guy I'm really looking to back this week, but both these sides are great DraftKings targets. Should be a very, very fun fight for as long as it lasts. Speaking of, 26-11, Derek the Black Beast Lewis versus the 21-8-1 Marcos Rogerio de Lima Pazao. Two fighters in completely opposite directions in their life. You have the well-known Derek Lewis, who is 1-4 in his last 5. All 4 of those losses coming by way of finish. Actually, his last 7 fights in total have ended by finish. Derek Lewis has the most knockouts of all time. I don't know why that surprised me. He's a very killer to-be-killed fighter at heavyweight. Marcos Rogerio de Lima is the opposite. He's gone 4-1 in his last 5, including some very impressive wins, including that showing against Arlovsky last October. Well, this is the epitome of a Derek Lewis or any heavyweight fight at all. It is super, super simple. Marcos Rogerio de Lima is the side here. He is way better technically. He has way better style. He has a way better style in general in this matchup in terms of having those leg kicks, having some offensive grappling, having more volume. But it's Derek Lewis. He can land a bomb against anybody. We've seen when he's taken this step down in competition, he's been able to go out there and get these wins. And to me, he's someone you could never count out. You can never bet against Derek Lewis because he has that power that can shut anybody's lights out. But let's look at the facts here. Derek Lewis doesn't seem to be in it anymore. He seems to throw one flurry, then just give up. Didn't even land one strike against Sergey Spivak his last fight. And this matchup is an elevation. That is a hilarious thought to me, to see this guy who can be gassed after maybe 2 punches he throws. Marcos Rogerio de Lima is in a prime spot to get a victory here. He can get it done with his leg kicks, his grappling, his better technique from outside, and probably just melt Derek Lewis en route to a finish win here. I think this fight materializes in a finish either way, and although I talked about this in my last couple fights, this is a fight you want to target. Rogerio de Lima is projected to win inside the distance. He scored 120 against Rothwell, 108 against Arlovsky, 106 against Green, 107 against Asoli. He has high upside here. And against a guy in Lewis who's giving up as much fantasy points as he has recently, you definitely want to look there. Flip side of things, when Derek Lewis wins fights, 105 against Dawkins, 82 against Blades, 108 against Oleinik. He is a finisher. Most knockouts all time. I don't need to remind you guys of that. So he is someone you probably want to look at as well. This fight is a heavyweight slot fest, one where I think Marcos Rogerio de Lima has all the upside. He should be winning this fight unless Derek Lewis lands a bomb. You can never count that out. However, I do think the opportunities for those knockouts are getting slimmer and slimmer as time goes on, especially with elevation. It should be Lima all day here, but a very interesting one to say the least. Next up, 16-4 Trevin Giles versus the 14-0 Gabriel Bonfim, another one of the Bonfim brothers, and he's facing off Richard Giles in what should be a fun matchup, but one where we have a heavy favorite, and probably for good reason. I mean, Giles has had very suspect fight IQ, very suspect decision recently, and although he's won his last couple fights, not very convincingly against lower level of competition, and he's being fed to another killer here, another prospect in Gabriel Bonfim, who's been very, very dangerous, 14-0. Bonfim absolutely decimated him here last time. I mean, it's not even funny how dangerous this guy is on the mat. And he's getting a guy here who he can use that against a Trevin Giles, a guy who not only can be hit, can be knocked out, but can be submitted, who puts himself in these very precarious situations. And I think that you have the guy who's more dangerous, more highly touted by the UFC here in Bonfim, and the guy who should be favored. Giles is just someone you can't trust at this point in his career. I mean, he's made a lot of questionable decisions. He's won his last two, but against low competition, and I think Bonfim is the rightful favorite here. Bonfim is not only incredibly technical on the feet, but insane ground game. He has that in his back pocket. Charlie decides to go there, and we've seen Giles not only give up the neck, but be knocked out. I do think it finishes there on the table for Bonfim, and I do think he's a very, very viable target up top there at 9.2K. We saw how quickly he wraps things up on the ground here, and I think that the power and submission upside is no joke. He is definitely someone who's going to be chalky at this range, but someone who I'm going to want to look towards rostering. Bonfim is the far more reliable guy, although not facing the best level of competition recently, has all the tools to get it done. He should walk away with another finish win here against the questionable fight IQ of Trevin Giles. Then we move on to the main card. Next up, we have the 24-9 Kevin Trailblazer, Big Mel Holland, whatever you want to call him, versus the 16-6 Michael Chiesa. A very, very fun fight. And Kevin Holland, one of my favorite fighters, a guy who never backed down from one, and a guy who just loves to put on a show. And he does that at a price, I guess, because he doesn't really make the best decisions inside the cage. He makes a lot of errors. And although he puts on some fun fights, it's not like he hasn't lost in the past. I mean, he put on an absolute war to Thompson last time, and it was fun to watch, but he lost that fight. He broke his hand. And before that, he got obliterated by Chimaev. Can't blame him on that, but he's been taken down control by Vettori and Brunson, and I think that's what the narrative is here, is a guy with very poor takedown defense versus a guy in Chiesa who just wants to lay and pray for 15 minutes. It seems like the path to victory is there for Chiesa. Will he get it done? That's the thing, is I've backed Chiesa against Magny. I backed Chiesa before in the past, and although that path to victory is there, I don't think it's as viable as the Vettori and Brunsons who did it. And I think that the more this line closes, the more I get tempted on Kevin Holland, because although the fight IQ isn't there, technique is, the skill is, and him taking down and control over two guys at 185, whereas now at 170 he will have the frame to defend these takedowns. He will be winning all the striking change on the feet, and in addition to that, if Chiesa suits, he's been submitted many times before, and we know that Darce, that ground game of Kevin Holland, is no joke. So to me, the guy with more finish upside is Kevin Holland. The guy with more striking upside is Kevin Holland. The guy the UFC probably wants to win here is Kevin Holland, and for that reason, especially not showing any signs of slowing down at all cardio-wise, at elevation, he's the guy I want to back. I think he has more paths to victory to get it done, and he's going to be a pick at 8.4K. Also a fun option, because when he wins these fights, he's typically finishing 981 his last one, but before that, 88, 100, 112. The guy is a historically good finisher and someone who's going to be very viable at 8.4K. I do think he submits Chiesa, but it should be a very, very close fight. I don't mind the shot on Chiesa either, because I mean, his path to victory is takedowns and control. One that scored 110 against Sanchez, 100 against Magny, and one that I think could be a viable path to victory here. So I think the shot is there for Chiesa. I don't think it's north of 35-40%, and for that reason I'm going to be taking Holland. I do think he wins this fight here, and I do think he has more finish equity as well. And then we get to this one. Yeah, this one. 24-8 Tony Ferguson, 29-14-1 Bobby Green. Two legends of the sport, but Tony Ferguson isn't Tony Ferguson recently. He's not. That fight against Diaz was a heartbreaker. You can't fault him for the Chandler one, but you saw after that last performance, it's so hard to back this guy at all, at any fight against any opponent here. And although the Tony Ferguson of all is looming large in our mind, he's not in the right headspace. He doesn't have that same explosiveness or speed or, even will to win at this point. Introducing a guy in Bobby Green, who although is a good performer, is someone who is rightfully favored here. Should he be the largest favorite of the card? Maybe not, but against the Ferguson that showed up against Diaz, yeah, that guy wasn't ready to fight, wasn't in the right mind space, and Green should dispose of him here. It's a horrible fight to break down for me, because it could be just a 15-minute striking war where Bobby Green rolls his punches, puts on a show for the crowd, and wins a decision that way, like a Adesanya versus Silva type fight. Bobby Green is not a good DraftKings scorer. Historically, he's not someone you want to back, and you add in, he's winless in his last three too, so Is he going to go out there hungry for a finish, or just be cautious? There's a lot of intangibles to take over. All I know for me is I don't want any action on this fight. I don't want to bet against the downfall of Tony Ferguson. I don't think that I want to back Tony Ferguson at all at this point of his career. This is a sit back and watch fight for me. However, on DraftKings, Bobby Green is viable. He's a large favorite to get it done. He is someone who has the skills to get a washed up Tony Ferguson out of there, but does he outscore the Miranda Mavericks with a clear submission and ground game upside? The Jake Matthews with a clear cardio edge? The Gabriel Bonfim with a clear everything edge? Or any other fighters I've mentioned? It's really hard for me to get to Bobby Green at 9.5K, albeit that's what everyone's saying as well. So Green, great cash option, great pivot play, but not one of my core GPP plays. And I think this fight is an interesting one to say the least. I hope Green doesn't kill Ferguson too bad. I wish Ferguson the best. Retirement next, who knows? But it's a fight nonetheless. And then we move on to 17-6-1 Stephen Thompson, Wonderboy Thompson. I don't even know who Stephen Thompson is. It's Wonderboy Thompson. And then the 28-11 Michel Pereira, not Alex, Michel Pereira. Stephen Thompson, Wonderboy, phenomenal striker. Don't care how old you are. One of the best strikers we've seen. Showed a deficiency in his ground game there and showed he is not perfect, but anytime this fight is on the feet, man, he is absolutely toying with all his opponents. I mean, he made a mockery of Jeff Neal, put on an entertaining scrap against Holland, but one that he showed great volume, great output, great technicality. Stephen Thompson's good. And Michel Pereira on the flip side of things is someone who is an entertainer. I mean, I'd love to see Pereira against Holland. That'd be a fun fight. But Pereira's a guy who wants to go out there and put on a show. I mean, he's doing backflips to Nico Price's head. He's dancing around against Imadaev and slapping him. He's doing all these things that make him entertaining, but not necessarily going to win the fights all the time. And I think the real question comes down to what's the game plan Michel Pereira is going to implement. Because at range on the feet, I don't know how many people are beating Stephen Thompson. I don't care how old he is. I don't know who beat Stephen Thompson in a 15-minute kickboxing affair because he has been so technically sound, makes the right adjustments, and at elevation has good cardio for days. Pereira, though, we know he has that grappling in his back pocket. We know he's able to go there. We saw Stephen Thompson taken down and controlled, albeit by the best guys in the division, but pretty clearly. So I think Pereira definitely has that in his back pocket if he decides to dedicate himself to that solely. The problem is although Pereira is someone who is able and has that path to victory, his cardio isn't great, so it won't translate over to elevation very well. His striking, although fun and explosive, I mean, he can be hit, and that's not something we want to see against Stephen Thompson. And his control grappling has never been the best. I mean, he's shown to land and takedown, sort of a decent submission game. He doesn't have that same control that a Bilal Muhammad or a Gilbert Burns does that you'd want to see against Thompson. So, simply put, I pick Stephen Thompson here. I think he is the guy you can trust more at this point right here. I think we can know what style is going to go in there. And unless Michel Pereira fights perfect, which I'm not saying he's not going to do, but unless he fights perfect, he's going to have a lot on his plate here. Stephen Thompson should be the favorite. He should win this fight. However, on DraftKings, there's one side of this, and it's Pereira. I picked Thompson, but I can't roster him between my lineups ahead of Semelsberger, De Lima, Bonfim, Matthews. Like, there are some clear options I want to get to, and Thompson, although scoring well, in his 3-round decisions, he's scoring 95, 68. He's content to stay at range. He's content to pick you apart, and he's not necessarily someone I'm running to go roster. Whereas Pereira, if he wins this fight, it's going to either involve a ton of grappling or a finish. And we've seen an older guy in Wonderboy finish before, so it's definitely there. 7.4K, he may be one of the most live underdogs below the 7.6 range. Like, I think he's way more live than Ferguson, Cachoeira, Flowers, Giles. Yeah, Ribeiro. So he makes it the best option down low, and definitely someone who has a clear-cut path to victory to the DraftKings optimal lineup. It's just what he decides to go in there and implement. So nowhere near a lock. I think Stephen Thompson's the rightful favorite. He's the side I'm going to pick, but there is some DraftKings viability for Michel Pereira. And then getting to the two big ones here, the real Pereira here, Alex Poatan Pereira, 7-2 versus Jan Polish Power Blachowicz, 29-9-1. Co-main event, is it for the belt? No, it's not. 3 5-minute rounds, and I wish we could see more, but we have ourselves a very, very fun matchup and a super tough one to call. Alex Pereira, we know who the guy is. Incredible striker, tons of power, has only really fought strikers so far in the UFC and has disposed of them accordingly. Knocked out Adesanya, was brutally knocked out Adesanya his own right a couple months ago, and is now moving up. Does the move up in weight scare me? No, like, it doesn't, because Pereira's huge. I mean, Pereira's still going to be 2 inches taller here. He's still going to have the longer reach. He's still going to be I don't know. He should be at 205 in the first place. He's a huge guy. But he takes on Polish Power, 40 years old, but still a guy who we've seen win his fights recently, been very explosive. In his own rights, have the same ability to knock anybody out, and he also has that grappling in his back pocket that he displayed against Israel Adesanya, and that seems to be the talk of the town. Does Blachowicz go out there and grapple for 15 minutes against someone Alex Pereira, who he definitely has that advantage over? And yes, it's viable. But worthy to make him the favorite? Because at 40 years old, we've seen Jan Blachowicz rocked. I mean, we've seen him hit with that left hand by Glover and then submitted shortly after. We've seen him dropped and finished by Santos with the left hook and finished. Blachowicz, although having a ton of power and great strike in his own right, is not defensively perfect. He has holes in his game as well, and it's not like he's out there being huge favorites to all these guys. He was an underdog to Adesanya big time in a fight where I think this is a more dangerous matchup for him here now. Also a huge underdog to Reyes, to Gaethje, to Ankalaev. Like, he's not going to be backed out there as a supreme grappler. But yes, that path to victory is there. How do I see this fight playing out? Well, Pereira knows what's in front of him. He should be training that grappling. He should be working that get-up game. And yeah, of course, Blachowicz is always allowed to get those takedowns. But I think it's more 55% Pereira, 45% Jan. And for that reason, the pick's going to be Alex Pereira. Because I think as long as this fight's on the feet, he is a very good... Well, no doubt he's a very, very good striker, a ton of power, and I think he's going to have the ability to knock out Jan's lights as long as this fight's on the feet. Flip side of things, I think he's physically imposing enough to stop the takedowns, be working with Glover to go out there and make it a brawl. And if this fight does go 15 minutes, there's bound to be some striking exchanges to which I think Alex Pereira can get the better of, all en route to winning this fight here. So to me, it's a close fight. I did bet Pereira at plus 110. I think his line's going to come back to that because I've seen a lot of love for Blachowicz. But this is another fight you want to target. It's very violent. I mean, Pereira does have finish upside in his own right. When he knocked out Adesanya, scored 92. When he knocked out Strickland, scored 110. Very viable guy in his own right, because I do think he's probably going to have to either have Blachowicz engage for 15 minutes on the feet or find the knockout. Whereas Blachowicz is a guy who's also a pretty good DraftKings scorer. I mean, he scored 116 against Adesanya. That was 5 rounds, but in here he should still have 90-point upside in a decision wrestling-based victory. And this is a fun fight to target as well. I'm siding Pereira, but very hesitantly. Both fighters have their path to victories. I'm just siding with the striker here, who I hope is making the right improvements in the grappling. Then we get to the main event, 29-7, Dustin Poirier, 24-4, Justin Gaethje, the vacant BMF belt. Wow, we got that back in the line. This is a fun fight. Fight of the year, upside here. Both these guys go in there, they throw down, they have wars, and last time they did, we had one guy come out on top, Dustin Poirier, 110, and he's a slight favorite for that reason. We saw him go out there and finally get that finish after being out leg kicked and potentially looking to me, he might be losing that fight there. But he found the switch, found the knockout power, and he got there. This is the hardest fight to call for me. This truly should be probably 50-50, maybe minus 115 Poirier, minus 105 Gaethje. And I'm no Gaethje lover, but he seems to be in the right mindset. He seems to have the path to victory where he's putting out a lot of volume, a lot of leg kicks, making the right adaptations. And in a fight where we have 25 minutes of striking, both these guys are durable enough to it matters who's going to win the optics. And is it going to be the headshots of Poirier or the versatility and the mixing up to the legs and body of Gaethje? Now, I'm picking Poirier. I've seen him go out there and win before. I've seen him have the ability to withstand a ton of the damage and still keep forward. And I've seen Gaethje rocked by a lot of these shots and fighting close. And although neither of these guys are defensively sound, I think Poirier is more defensively sound. And although he could have his legs beat up, is someone who I think has potential to win this fight here. And this is super, super close. I see it going to the later rounds where maybe we see another barn burner before that ends with a finish. But really, it could go to decision. And in that case, it is a true toss-up. I'm going to side with the boxing and head hunting of Poirier instead of the leg kicks and overall accumulation of damage of Gaethje. But it is a super fun fight, one you want to have on DraftKings. Pick your side. Pick your poison. It's an extremely fun fight. I'm slightly leaning towards Poirier, but I could be talking to Gaethje. Like, I'm truly on the fence about this one. I have no hot take. I will not be betting this one. I'm siding with Poirier due to what I mentioned, but it is a super fun fight. I'd love to hear your guys' thoughts in the comment section down below, so please tell me you think to win that one, and it should be a fun fight for as long as it lasts. But that's going to do it for us here on the Plays and Fades YouTube channel. Let's quickly run through my quick picks. Like I said, very hesitantly picking Dustin Poirier, very closely picking Alex Pereira, taking Stephen Wonderboy Thompson, taking Bobby Green, Kevin Holland, Gabriel Bonfim, Marcos Rogerio de Lima, Roman Kopylov, Jake Matthews, CJ Vergara, Matthew Semelsberger, and Miranda Maverick. We picked almost all favorites again, which is terrifying. But there are a lot of close fights that I did highlight out there. DraftKings-wise, I talked about a lot, so let me sum it up for you here. Poirier Gaethje, I want. Rogerio de Lima Lewis, I want. Semelsberger's Medic, I want. Those are the 3 fights I want. And then you have Holland Chiesa, Pereira Blachowicz, and Kopylov Ribeiro as your 3 pivots, and the Jake Matthews fight in Flowers. I'm all over the place here. Let's try that again. Up top, I think the best cash play is probably Maverick and Green, but GPP-wise, Matthews, Bonfim are great options. I'm taking Semelsberger, De Lima, Holland as 3 very key plays in the mid-range, and then pick your side. Pick your Poirier Gaethje. You could also pivot and go to Blachowicz Pereira. Down low, I think Medic's path to victory scores very well. I think Salvador's path to victory scores very well. And I think Pereira's path to victory scores very well. GPP-wise, the punt plays this week is Darius Flowers and Derek Lewis. Cash-wise, Pereira is there for sure. But overall, a very fun card. Rainmakers-wise, highest ceiling on the card, Vergara de Lima, Poirier, Maverick, Matthews. Those four right there. To get a bit different, take Kopylov, Kevin Holland maybe. A lot of good options at Rainmakers as well. Semelsberger fight should be also a ton of fun for that. So if you want to get an underdog, pick one in that one as well. And then betting wise, I only have one bet locked in. Alex Pereira moneyline plus 110. We might add from there. I'm definitely looking at playing the under in the Maverick fight, the under in the Semelsberger fight. Again, it is an elevation, so I am leaning towards a lot of under here. Under the Matthews Flowers fight for sure. I will be betting that. Maybe some Stephen Thompson or some Kevin Holland. Those lines come down. I don't know. We'll still get there. I just had a lot of fun talking that fight. But if you want to see my full card of bets, check me out on Twitter at GamblesGordo. And again, if you have any comments, please leave them in the comment section down below. Now we're at the point where I'm telling you, please like the video, subscribe to the channel. We do this each and every week, and I'm sorry if we went a bit long on this one, but we're talking fights, and this is a super stacked card, and I was happy to do so. So hopefully you guys enjoyed. Hopefully you guys are gaining us insight to win your DraftKings and bets this weekend. I hope everyone enjoys the card, and let's make some money, guys.